Alright, so back to the present. So in this part, I would like to talk about my building style and inspiration. So in case there was any doubt, everything you saw me build in this movie was first made in creative mode. Given the scale of some of those builds, it would have been almost impossible to not have a off by one error. Speaking of off by one error, you might have wondered why the starter house is not lined up with everything else. Well, the very first thing I built in this world was actually the main tower. But since it was way too big to be built with bronze or even iron tools, I decided to start on a smaller scale with the starter house. At this point, I didn't know that everything was going to be lined up, so I leave it like that. Then I added the perimeter. Wait, is that maple sapling? Oh yeah, that's right. I use those maple sapling for making the ensign. Completely forget. But anyway, so I added the perimeter, and then I added the crop farm, and finally I added the garden, which was a very late addition. I was still in creative mode back then, and I could have mobbed the house in survival. But I would have preferred to do it first in creative mode, and that was way too much work. It was not that much of a big deal anyway. Oh, and while I'm here, I've noticed another stupid mistake. Man, I use this minecart line over 100 times now, and only recently I noticed this redstone wire is completely useless. The button is actually enough to power the rail. But anyway, so that base was about 260 blocks long from south to north, which is from the garden to the crop farm. Without a doubt, this is my biggest base, and I had planned to make it even bigger. I will talk about this later, about future projects, not in this episode though. And I'm still not sure I will do this in survival. You know what? I'm tired of the sorry state of this minecart station. Man, I should have finished it while I was building the viaduct. And I can talk about this while I'm finishing the station. I have been playing Minecraft like this for years now. I always have two copies of all of my worlds. One in survival and one exact copy but in creative mode. Yeah, whenever I want to build something, however tiny it is, I always try first in creative mode. And the main reason why I want an exact copy and not just a flat world is because I like to work with the landscape. I always try to integrate my builds with it, and so everything needs to be measured very precisely. And as far as my building style is concerned, it is very consistent. Sometimes I wish I would get out of my comfort zone, but every time I start playing with something different, I always came back to the same style. And by far, my favorite types of buildings are towers. Because for me, they act like a beacon. The higher they go, the farther you can see them from. Although I have a pretty good sense of direction. I mean, I was able to find my way through alpha caves, so mostly flat ground is a piece of cake in comparison. But still, very useful at night seeing the top of the tower from very far. And for the main base, I'm willing to spend quite a lot of time to be sure that it is pleasing to me. I will go to extra lengths and use all the tools that I know, like MC Edit, Creative Mod, and especially getting inspiration from artists and give them credit, of course. I mean, it is almost impossible to come up with a completely blank new idea nowadays. The best I can do is iterating over some existing ideas, and even that is quite a lot of effort. Even more so for me because I've done this exercise quite a few times now, and I've become quite picky. I have to admit this is a challenge in itself. Because, you know, when I come to a new area, usually my first thought is always, what am I going to do? Because going from this to this, even though I've done it quite a few times now, I still have some kind of apprehension whenever I start a fresh new world. What if I run out of inspiration? Well, I guess I will stop playing this game, but for now there are still some stuff I would like to try out. It's quite a testament to the creativity that can emerge from this game, even after all these years. Anyway, one of the main challenge for a major build is to find something that has a somewhat interesting shape, because if you look at in a typical image search for the terms medieval tower, for example, you will see that most of the results are pretty boring. The basic shape is too simple in my opinion, like a cylinder with a bigger cylinder top, or your typical house, a box with a sloped roof. Yep, been there, done that over and over again. I mean, you can detail it as much as you want, but at some point it's going to be hard to hide the overall shape of the building if it is too simple. And since I've done it quite a few times now, I need a challenge. Otherwise, I will get bored way too quickly. So, when I'm looking for inspiration, I prefer to use the terms fantasy tower. You get a lot more variety in shape, but make no mistakes, there's still a lot of effort to integrate this in a Minecraft world. Or for really unusual stuff, you can look for futuristic tower or concept art, but this is usually even harder to integrate, but again, might be worth it to do for a main base. But you have to keep into account the limitation of Minecraft and even Terrafirmacraft. Because even if TSC, there is a limit to how detailed your build can go with the chisel. Because the detail mod is way too difficult to be practical for large scale project. If you make one mistake, you have to delete the entire block. You will rage quit for anything too complicated, not to mention performance issue. Another limitation to keep in mind with chiseled blocks is that they lack ambient occlusion. This is a shadow effect you get when you are placing a full block, and also they are completely transparent to skylight. Non-full blocks of vanilla Minecraft also lack this effect, but at least they are opaque to skylight. And this creates a shading column below the block. And I just realized something with TFC. Man, I have only been playing this mod for like 5 years now. On vanilla Minecraft, you have a fixed shading per face. Like the top face is always the brightest, then you have north and south a little bit darker, then east, west, and finally bottom is darkest. Well, not in TFC. You learn every day. Still, the ambient occlusion and that fixed shading help quite a bit for making sense of a 3D shape. Without it, the details tend to blur with textures, especially with the detail mode. Man, look at this, the details are completely lost. Yeah, the only type of chisel blocks you can realistically use in a large-scale build in TFC are stairs or slab mod, and maybe a couple of detailed blocks. And that kind of limits the shape of the build you can make. Usually stuff that are too detailed, like Gothic or Neo-Gothic architecture, are pain in the ass to reproduce in Minecraft, unless you're willing to use extremely large scale in order to compensate for the limited resolution of the blocks. But you cannot go too big, because above a certain scale, the resources you will need becomes impractical. Not to mention how annoying it is to move around. You really get tired of this really quickly. I didn't show it very often, but those minecarts are used quite a lot. Another limitation that is proper to TFC is that the sea level is around 150. That means you have about 100 blocks to work with. Actually, this tower is almost 100 blocks high, starting at the garden level, even though that should be enough for 99% of the time. But still, sometimes I wish Minecraft would let you build above this height, because I always wanted to try a super tall tower similar to the Citadel in City 17 in Half-Life 2. But yeah, if you go too high, the render distance is going to cut most of the landscape, so it's probably not worth it right now. I guess you have to wait for Minecraft too, huh? So when you take all these limitations into account, and given how much effort you're willing to spend, there's usually not that much options left. And even when you find a model that fits all your criteria, there's still a lot of work left to integrate this in a survival world. And actually, let me give you a quick overview of what I have to do for the main tower. Usually my first step is to do a quick mockup in the test world, just to get its basic shape and dimension right. As you can see, it's pretty rough around the edge, but since the detailing has to be done with the landscape in mind, it's pointless to do it here. This is actually my test world where most of my major builds are. The secondary structures, I build them directly in a creative copy of the given world. The reason I'm building this in Vanilla Minecraft is because I can use MC Edit for this. Because it is easier to copy, paste, mirror, or rotate chunks, especially useful when builds have a lot of symmetry, which almost all of my builds have. Yeah, the garden was also built first in this world. Looks a lot better in Terrafirmacraft, huh? Then, once I'm satisfied, I import the model in a creative world using MC Edit. As you can see, almost no blocks from TFC are recognized. And by editing the world in MC Edit, the TFC world will be completely screwed. Lightning will be wrong and some blocks will be probably missing. But that's why I'm doing this in a creative world, to mess stuff up. Yeah, placing the model can be challenging when the landscape looks like this. But once you are done, click on Import and then convert Minecraft blocks into Terrafirmacraft blocks. In this case, I just want to convert stone bricks into chalk bricks. Before importing the model, I placed some chalk bricks to give me the idea of the block. It's not perfect, but at least 95% of the Minecraft blocks will be converted, which is still way faster than doing it manually. So once you save your changes, the world will be screwed, like lightning glitches almost everywhere. But as you can see, there is still a lot of work left, like decorating the tower, adding interior, integrating the structure with the landscape. I won't redo the whole process because it took me almost 2 weeks to do this. So here are some early screenshots of what the shell of the tower looked like. Overall, it looks way too plain. You need a secondary color to make it more interesting to look at. Even though in this state the shape is pretty good, it is hard to break it down using simpler primitives. It's not really a box, there are multiple levels of details, the proportions look fine, it just needs more detailing. As for the color of the decoration, you might have wondered why I chose green for the tower. Well, believe it or not, it was a simple matter of elimination. I didn't want to use red because I knew a lot of the secondary builds will use sequoia planks as the main building material. So I thought adding even more red would be overdosing that color. But there is another reason why red would be a bad idea, and let me show you why. Damn, took me 1 hour to do this. Man, I almost forget how primitive the creative mode of Minecraft really is. But anyway, you can see here that the color is way too dark. It shifts the focus away from the tower and instead focus on the decorations. I used sequoia planks and charred stone and charred bricks, or at least I try to, and I really don't like what's already there. I'm glad I stick to white elm because the color is not as overwhelming as most of the red colored blocks. Oh, by the way, this is the original creative world where I experimented with all my builds. There's a few late changes I made in survival. I will show you them later. Man, I have way too much free time on my hand, it seems. Anyway, here it is in yellow or in sycamore planks. It's better than sequoia planks for sure, but I still prefer white elm. As for other colors like blue, that was out of the question. There's way too little blue colors in TFC and most of them requires lapis lazuli. There we go, a minecart station is finally done. And I can't believe I built this in creative mode almost 2 years ago. Wow. Anyway, the other colors I was potentially looking are orange and shade of grey, but meh, they are too boring in my opinion. So the only palette left was green, and I think it was a good choice. White elm planks are light enough to not be too visible, unlike willow planks, and it kind of integrates well with the color of the grass. Since the rain value is pretty high around here, the grass is very green. And there we go, that's how I came up with this color. As you can see, that was a lot of effort, and even though I thought this was a pretty reasonable way to play this game, now I realize that this is a little bit over the top. There are probably not that many people willing to spend that much time. Kind of a shame, because just trying a few times in the creative mode, you will usually come up with something way better than trying to build it straight in survival. It would be even better if the creative mode would be better integrated, because I always wanted to push a button while I'm in survival mode, so that you can temporarily switch to creative mode. You can then do all the modification you want once you switch back to survival. All the changes are cancelled. But they are also saved in a schematic that you can use in a mod like Schematica. Because like that, you wouldn't need two copies of the worlds, and you can even get rid of the coordinate system, which I always wanted to do, but it's impossible if you have two separate worlds. But yeah, even when you are finished with the creative part, you still have to build this in survival. And depending on the scale of the build, quite often there is so much stuff to do that it is hard just to get started. Because yeah, building something like that in creative is one thing, but once you're back in survival, you have to redo the whole thing again. Ugh. And now having to make a movie on top of that, man, I thought that was easy. Well, it would have been easier with better tools, that's for sure. But still, I would much prefer watching something like that instead of making it. And now that I know the effort it takes, is probably not going to happen anytime soon. Alright, the minecart station is finally done. So, that was the effort I'm willing to spend on a major build. And there is usually only one in a map. Everything else is what I would consider secondary builds. I'm way less picky about this, but I would like to review some of them. The second structure I built on this map was actually the starter house, because obviously I couldn't start building a tower like that with only bronze tools, so I needed something of a smaller scale, and actually I built this house pretty quickly. I like it for quite a long time, but after a while I started to have some mixed feeling. Like I said previously, its shape is a little bit too simple, like a box with a circular roof and a spire. The front also is a little bit too flat. Way later I decided to make some renovations for this house, but by then the movie was almost over, so I wasn't going to make those changes, at least not in this movie. At first I wasn't convinced by those changes, but now the more I look at it, the more I like them. What I basically did is I changed the shape of the roof and added more depth to the front. Like the front originally stopped here, so I added two more blocks in those forward sections. Its shape is quite interesting depending on the angle you look at it. It looks nice up close as well as far away. Yeah, I also really like the detailing I did on the roof, even though it is very hard to see in survival. Because of that overhang, you cannot see it from the tower. Yeah, I really think I did a good job here. I will probably rebuild this in survival. The next structure I built in creative was a stone generator. Probably the second most important building in this map. I already said that, but this is an extremely useful contraption. You will always need filler blocks, even late game. But if I have to make one criticism, is that the interior could have been more decorated. Because given how many hours I spent in this cubicle, I really wish I had something better than this goddamn wall to look at. Like that, for example. These small touches make all the difference. Even though it would have been a pain in the ass to spread the grass down there, but I could have used a piston for this. But anyway, it's probably too late now. The stone generator was, of course, needed for the perimeter. My initial idea was quite different from what I eventually did. I'll probably talk about this in the next episode about future projects, but my initial plan was to make it much bigger than this. But I quickly realized that the resources that I would need was way above what I had access back then. Basically, I needed lava and water buckets, and a huge amount of rocks too, so I scaled down my ambitions. For fun, this is the first version I did in creative mode. I changed it again in survival because those towers were way too high, way too high. The height I used for this entrance was largely enough. I also removed this small tower because it was purely a decoration and there was enough work to do already, so no need to add useless stuff. Overall, I did a decent job, but if I have to make one criticism, is that the northern wall could have been pushed a little bit farther, like 5 or 6 blocks to the north. Because way too often I would use the space outside the perimeter as a tree farm, but I would have needed almost 3,000 more feeder blocks, and I already used almost 8,000. So yeah, enough I guess. I really like the design of the fence. The only problem with this is that those pillars are almost impossible to rotate by anything but 90 degrees. Because if I wanted to incorporate a circular shape in the perimeter, I would have to completely change the design of those pillars. And my initial plan included lots of circular section. But we will see about that because so far I've done nothing in creative mode yet. The next build was storage expansion. Not much to say about this one. Its design was pretty basic, but since wood takes a lot of space, I like to have it stored in a separate place, usually near the tree farms. At this point, it is pretty well stocked and almost overflowing with sequoias. Then there was a barn. I really like its design and only wish it would be more visible. It is actually very hard to see from almost any angle. It is either blocked by the mountain or by all the trees all around. Too bad, but I prefer to keep as much as possible of the original forest. Even though it is a pretty standard design, it fits rather well the theme I used so far for all the structures I built around the perimeter. But it wasn't as useful as I hoped, because I realized at some point that the top of the main tower was extremely cold and could easily serve as a food storage. I still have some stuff stored in there, not as much as I wanted. I have doubled the amount in the main tower. Oh yeah, this cabbage, the first food item I stored. Still there, and not too bad decay-wise. But that method for preserving food is one of my least favorite game mechanic in TFC. It's way too much micromanagement. Right now, its only real purpose is to make cheese. It's not very much, and this is something I avoid doing at all costs, what I call playing in the creative survival. It is building stuff for the sake of building stuff. I want all of my builds to have a purpose, and not just a flimsy one, like a real reason for using this build even in the late game. Oh yeah, that's how you get saplings you normally cannot get. You wait until they spawn naturally. What? I've not finished the roof on this side. Oh well, not much left, hopefully. So yeah, creative survival. I've been there and done that, building something just for the looks. You take some screenshots and after that it is never to be seen ever again. It gets old very quickly for me, so I avoid this as much as possible. And yeah, this build almost fall into this category. And usually the structures that are not useful anymore, I tend to demolish them. But in TFC, removing stuff is way too much work, so it will stay there for now. Even though if I ever want to twist my initial idea I had with the perimeter, I'm pretty sure the barn will be in the middle of it, and I would have to remove it, or at least rebuild it somewhere else. The next build was the Dolomite Cinnabar Outpost, probably one of my least favorite builds. I spent way too much time fiddling with its shape and ended up building something that is somewhat similar to the main base of my first TFC playthrough. The top part feels off. Its shape is a weird mixture of different geometric primitives and does not fits very well. I also think that the sequoia planks was a little bit overdone. I should have used less, especially the top part. Still, not too bad, even though I have a feeling of deja vu whenever I look at it. Yeah, the thing is, for a secondary build like this one, I would have preferred to use mostly wood, but since I had a bunch of quartzite laying around while I was digging the internal staircase, I forced myself to use bricks, which kind of limits the palette you can use. I will still probably rebuild this at some point, but right now it's not my priority. And finally, the last build I made was a garden. Probably my most complex time-lapse I had to make for this movie. I spent, I think, about 1 month and a half making it, but I will probably talk about this in the next episode. For a very long time, I really didn't know what to build. I had really no inspiration at all. So it was just this patch of grass for about 1 year and a half. But eventually I got some inspiration by looking at pictures of real-world gardens. And this is the first version I did in CreativeMod. Even though I more or less copied the real garden, there was two problems with this version. First, the entrance is cut way too short because of the landscape. Second, even though the real garden looks really nice, it didn't have a 100-meter tower next to it. And as a result, this version looks way too small in comparison, especially when looking from the top of the tower. It looks really tiny. I had room to expand, but the terrain was pretty rough around here. That cliff was quite annoying because the square garden just up here. So there was enough room to expand about 20 blocks to the south, but some major landscaping would be required. Like 10,000 blocks just to get the ground leveled and almost 5,000 more to fill all the holes there is around. Like here, here, or here, and even there. But at this point I already dumped like hundreds of hours into this project, so what's a couple more, right? Oh my god. So as this garden almost falls into the creative survival category, its only saving grace is that it is pretty visible from the top of the tower. Because if it is mostly hidden, what's the point of building it? I might as well spare me some effort. But overall, it goes really well with the tower, especially the southern entrance. It's a nice combination of arches, staircase, and pillars. I almost want to redo the perimeter with the same style. But I think, yeah, there's still a little bit of landscaping to be done. But hard to believe that there is 15,000 filler blocks below the ground. So the main purpose of this garden is to be some kind of museum, of all the stone and tree types I found. At least most of them. Because initially I wanted to include willows and sequoias in those half circles, but they are way too big. They would hide most of the garden and block the path. Speaking of path, I wanted to line them up with bushes. In Minecraft you can use leaf blocks for this, but in TFC you have to use berry bushes. But that would have been way too much, so I only did the inner circle, which was already 80% of all the bushes I found on this map, and doing the center pass would have required almost 200 more. And the last thing I wanted to do, but did not have the time to do it, is leveling the entire landscape around here. But again, that was too much work to fit in the time-lapse. And now with Insight, I went completely over the top with this seed. It seemed reasonable when I was building this in Creative. I mean, I spent about 1 or 2 months in Creative mode, but it took me almost 2 years of recording and editing. Man, back then I have no idea what I've got myself into. Maybe it was better like that, because if I knew, I would have given up a long time ago. So next episodes I would like to talk about future projects. Like I want to reduce the entire perimeter. Probably not in survival though, because it would take way too long. And if I have enough time, I would like also to talk about behind the scene stuff that happened for some of the episodes. Because for some of them I spent days for maybe 10 seconds in the final cut. Maybe it could serve as a warning to others if someone ever wants to do something similar. Anyway, stay tuned for the next episode.